A glass bottle is the perfect canvas for a work of art. So I took the labels off of this bottle. Cleaning the bottle is my least favorite thing to do, but here's a tip. Every manufacturer puts those labels on in a different way. So I just put my heat gun to it, got it heated up the label area, softened up the glue, and peeled it off, and then tried to scrub it off. But you don't have to get it off, all the glue and everything, if you're going to paint over it. Doesn't have to be perfection. Now I'm just giving it a quick base coat of the color Oyster. And I'm not worried about brush strokes or anything like that because I'm going to be putting a lot of texture on it. So just get that base coat on and set it aside to dry. Here's my secret tool for salt wash. Yep, a little mini sifter. You'll see how I'm going to use it. My bottle is dry, so now I'm going to go back to the color Oyster and I'm going to apply a nice thick layer of paint on my bottle. I'm just going to do a little section at a time, but a nice thick coat of paint. You can't get it too thick on there because I am going to be adding salt wash and I'm going to create texture. Now I'm going to scoop out a little salt wash and I'm going to put it through my sifter and I'm just going to dust it over that wet paint. It's kind of like when you put powdered sugar on your cake through a sifter, that same idea. I'm just taking a cheap and expensive chip brush and I am going to basically mix the salt wash into the paint right on the surface. Usually when I apply salt wash, I mix it up first and then I put it on. But this time I'm going to mix it right on. So the reason I'm doing this is because I don't want an uber thick layer of the salt wash. And I want to have maybe a little more control and a lighter coat of the salt wash on my bottle. And so this enables me to do that. And it's a little bit faster and it's frankly, it's a little less messy than mixing up all that salt wash all at once. So again, I'm ready to turn the bottle to the next section. I'm going to put on a nice thick coat of paint and I am going to put some salt wash in my little mini sifter that I'm using just for the salt wash. Got it on Amazon for about $5. And I'm going to sift over some salt wash over my wet paint surface. Again, take my chip brush and just blend it all in right on top of the bottle. Once you got your salt wash on, set that aside to dry, and now mine is dry. And the good thing about doing this method with the sifter and controlling more of how much of the salt wash you're getting on there is it doesn't take as long to dry. Now I'm using the color Peacock Feather, Hazelnut, and Oyster, and I'm going to kind of put them in sections. The Peacock Feather on the bottom, Hazelnut in the middle, Oyster on top. And then I'm going to take my brush and I'm just going to start to pull the colors together. This is a great way to practice blending colors. But when you're blending colors, you always want to choose colors that you know are going to play well together. Once I sort of have my basic blend on there, then I'm going to switch to the Miracle Sponge. My Miracle Sponge is a little damp. And then I'm just going to take my Miracle Sponge and I'm going to blot all over my bottle, bringing the colors together and blending them, leaving some areas lighter and darker until I'm just really happy with the color blend that I have on my bottle. I love these three colors together because the Hazelnut and Peacock Feather will turn it into more of a tropical kind of green, but I can play with it, and then the Oyster lightens it, so I can go back to my plate and I can keep dipping in those colors. I'm using the same sponge for all three colors, and I can keep dipping into those colors. I also have my Fine Mist spray bottle on hand, so if I need to put a little mist of water over my colors to keep the blending action going, that helps to do that. So I've got all of this texture and I'm just blending the colors right over my texture. I find that blending for me is a little easier when I have some texture on my surface. So if you're wanting to play with blending and you're wanting to play with salt wash before you commit to a big piece of furniture, a bottle is a great canvas to practice these techniques on. So again, just going over my bottle with my colors and just using the sponge and blending until I'm really just happy with my blend. Once I have all of my blending complete, I set that bottle aside to dry. Now this next part is optional. If you want to sand back some of the salt wash, remember I had that oyster was my salt wash base color underneath. So I'm just using a 150 grit piece of sandpaper and hand sanding it. I don't want to be too hard on it because I don't want to go all the way back to the glass of the bottle, but it's just revealing some of the oyster color that was underneath as my base coat of the salt wash. Once I do that, I'm going to set that aside and I am going to start working on my molds. I'm using my Iron Orchid Design seashell mold and I'm going to color the molds using mica powder. I'm going to be using amazing quick cast resin to create these molds. And so first I'm going to use the mica powder and just give the molds the little pop of color that I want them to have. When using resin of any kind, but this is quick cast resin that sets up in 10 to 15 minutes, there's always a part A and a part B. And you always mix equal parts of part A and part B. Once I get it into my container, then I use my stir stick and I stir it for about 30 to 45 seconds. Doesn't need longer than that because remember this is quick cast. I am adding a little mica powder to the resin so that it's not stark white on the back of my pieces once they are fully dry and I take them out of the mold. Now when I fill the mold, I start sort of at the top. You want to try to have as even as a surface to lay them on as you can, but I don't overfill them and then I allow the mold to sort of fill into all of the parts of the areas of the mold, and then after I pour all my resin, I go back and check, and if any of the resin has not moved into the whole part of the mold, then I'll just take my stir stick and help move it into the little nooks and crannies to make sure I get a complete pouring of the mold. Once you have all your resin poured, you set it aside and let the magic happen. It takes about, like I said, 10 to 15 minutes. I do put my stick back into the cup, into the wet resin, and it will also dry and set up in the cup. And when I pull that stick out, it pulls the set resin out with it, and I have a clean cup that I can use again and again. Now I'm ready to unmold, and look how beautiful my molds came out, already colored because we used the mica powder in the molds beforehand, and I love using this technique for coloring my molds. It works whether you're using air dry clay, resin, or even hot glue. Give it a try. It's really fun. You can find a lot of beautiful mica powders pretty inexpensively, of course, on Amazon or at your favorite hobby store. Now we're ready to add our beautiful molds to the bottle. You know, I like to use Titebond Quick and Thick. It is my favorite glue. I'm just going to decide which molds I want to use, and I'm going to cover the back of them with a nice, generous amount of glue. This glue goes on white, but it does dry clear, so if a little bit oozes off around the edges, well, I usually like to take a wet paintbrush and sort of scoop that off, but if it does dry, it will dry clear, so you don't have to worry so much about that. Now I've got my seahorse placed on there where I want him, and then I have to decide which other piece. I poured a lot of pieces, and not all of the pieces are going to fit on my bottle, so you'll see how I decide to use them. So the other pieces that I poured are just a little too big for the front of the bottle, but stay tuned and I'll show you how I am going to use them. Right now though, I'm going to add some twine to the neck of the bottle. I'm just going to take my Titebond Quick and Thick glue and I'm going to put it around the neck of the bottle, and then I am just going to wrap my twine around it, turning the bottle and making sure that I've got all of that area covered. So now let's see how we're going to add the other two pieces that I poured. They were a little too big to put on the front of the bottle, but I do want to tie them around the neck of the bottle. And so one of the things you can do with resin is it's really easy to just take, if you have a drill and you have a small drill bit, just drill a hole right through the top of it. Look how neat and clean that hole is. Then I can tie some twine around it and I can add them to the top of the bottle. And you saw in the picture, if you saw the picture of the completed bottle, you could see how that works. I do decide to just use the scallop shell and not both of them, but I can save this other piece for something else. Just thread it with the twine and tie it on. Now my work of art is complete. Bottles, don't throw them away. They are the perfect canvas for your creative ideas.